Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Endpoints' Manufacturing Day. I'm Sarani Fernando, your moderator for this next session titled Key Factors, Critical Insights, and Essential Expertise for Selecting a Cartridge-Based Drug Delivery Device. This session is sponsored by Grand River Aseptic Manufacturing. Joining us on the panel, we have Tyler Bevere, Director, Drug Product Manufacturing at Grand River Aseptic Manufacturing, and Vince Maciopinto from SHL Medical. Well, I missed your title, Customer Solutions Director at SHL Medical. So before we get stuck into the discussion, I wanted to mention that we may have a few minutes to answer a question or two at the end. So please hit the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen as soon as you think of a question, and we'll try and get to it. Okay, so Tyler and Vince, great to have you both here. So just to set the scene, in recent years, demand for more efficient and patient-friendly drug delivery has grown rapidly. Today, we'll dig into the critical considerations for developing auto-injectors, from choosing the right container and understanding manufacturing capabilities to navigating the nuances of filling and design verification. So just to start us off, Tyler, can you maybe share what considerations are important to keep in mind when choosing a primary container for a drug delivery device?
Yeah, absolutely. So to start off, I guess I'm Tyler, Director of Drug Product Manufacturing at Grand River Aseptic Manufacturing. For some background, we're a scalable fill finish pharmaceutical company that offer sterile injectable solutions for biologics in small molecules. So we've got 450,000 square feet of GMP space in our facilities. So we're excited to partner with SHL to support their 5 ml cartridge for the Maggie 5.0 autoinjector. But rolling into it, some considerations that are important to keep in mind specifically for the CDMO when choosing a primary container. There are a lot of ways to attack this question, but I think fundamentally it's paramount to consider the patient requirements for that primary container. The patient always comes first in this industry. So you've got to have considerations for the delivery system and the dosing requirements. And once you work through and you determine that patient experience, you can then move into the primary container consideration, component configurations, and then the functional requirements of the equipment. So the delivery system, you can have a controlled dose, a mechanical automated dose, and those requirements can have specific implementations to bubble size, which is impactful for the CDMO during the manufacturing process, and then also for patients during administration. Another thing to consider when choosing your primary container is going to be the equipment compatibility at the CDMO and available data for that specific primary container configuration. So in terms of equipment functionality and tracking on the equipment, if you're partnering or working with a CDMO, you can't necessarily assume that CMO has the right equipment or the right experience, unless it's a very common configuration in the industry. I think a lot of manufacturers, if they've got syringe or cartridge filling experience, they've generally got some touch time with, like a 1 ml long, for example. But moving into larger cartridge sizes, whether it be a 5 ml or 20 ml, they're a little less common, becoming more common as we move to biologics being dosed at home with patient administration. But it can create some engineering and design work that will increase project timelines if you're going to select a more novel size, which will ultimately increase time to market there. Another consideration that I think is important that maybe isn't as common in discussions is consideration for component selection for that primary container, specifically for sterilization of the stopper. So at Graham, we've seen some issues with stopper sterilization, both from suppliers and internally, depending on if it comes ready to use or if you're sterilizing it in-house. And that can impact project timelines and machine functionality. It's nothing that will necessarily halt a a project, but it's something to consider. And we've seen some cool solutions from suppliers creating some new innovative molds for the larger surface area on a larger cartridge size. You can see during sterilization some adhesion, and that adhesion will impact tracking through the line. So we've seen some molds that have dimples to reduce that surface area on the larger components for the cartridges and reduce that adhesion factor. Another consideration for the CMOs when selecting a primary container is going to be the qualifications, media fills, change parts. If the CMO has to onboard a new container or a novel or unique configuration, the validation is going to be a heavy point of consideration. So experience with the media fills for the primary container, executed interventions on the line for that specific container configuration is going to be important because you can see issues with stoppering or repeat interventions that can impact processing. So I guess to summarize it all, a suggestion for partners of CMOs would be to just consider a primary container that CMO has line data for and change parts for in-house. So leveraging that experience and recipe data is extremely advantageous. Cutting out the equipment OEM, if you've got to work with them to develop new change parts, you've generally got to send them some primary container samples so they can do the machinability studies, have them on site to install the change parts. If there are any equipment modifications or software updates, you just have to be aware that if you choose to go down that road, that it can increase tech transfer timelines and product to market times.
Okay, thanks, Tyler. Lots of important considerations there. Just to follow up on that, what nuances are involved in filling cartridges for injectors? Tyler, if you want to answer that one, and Vince, you can chime in after.
Yeah, I can. So yeah, there are a lot of nuances to cartridge filling. I think that everybody in the industry is pretty familiar with the traditional vial filling. You unload vials onto some sort of sorting table. They go through a washer, a dehydrogenation tunnel or oven. They receive the dose, stopper, and capped. Cartridge filling, it can be very different. The cartridges, generally, they'll come pre-sterilized, nested, and ready to use. So this does eliminate a lot of process steps like the washing and the dehydrogenation, but it does introduce other process steps that can have nuances about them and increase a different level of difficulty. So generally, you'll be dealing with some sort of variation of either robotics, lid deliners, depending on the equipment, innovations and philosophies from the equipment vendors, denesting and renesting. And so those implications are just something to consider and nuances that CMOs do have to work through. Another thing that can be a nuance for cartridge filling is going to be the stoppering type. So you've got vacuum stoppering and mechanical stoppering. They can be determined based on, bubble size or whether or not the primary container leverages a coated stopper or a non-coated stopper. But mechanical stoppering, the nuances with that is you can cause wrinkles in the stopper, which will allow the drug product to migrate back up into the ribs of the stopper for that cartridge and create some solution on stopper defects. With vacuum stoppering, if the vacuum settings for that container configuration are off, you can pull some drug product into the stopper ribs and create those solution on stopper defects as well. Obviously, all dependent on how that organization will categorize and classify those defects. The stoppering method for mechanical stoppering or vacuum stoppering also will impact the bubble size that's present in that primary container. The mechanical stoppering, that uses a rod to physically insert the stopper into that cartridge. And so you can see issues with mechanical stoppering and bubble size variation because Given that it's a mechanical set point for that stop ring insertion, you cannot always accommodate variation in fill volume. Whereas the difference with vacuum stop ring in that primary container, it uses a vacuum setting to draw that stopper into the primary container. And it's really, the most effective way, one of the most effective ways for a CMO to control and reduce that bubble size. So you don't need to accommodate for that variation in fill volume because of that mechanic or the vacuum set point, sorry. And so you really only need to consider the resistance of the components. Another nuance, one of the biggest nuances and impacts for cartridge filling is going to be the bubble size. So auto injectors oftentimes will require a very small bubble size so that patients aren't impacted during that automated and at-home delivery. Some pharmaceutical customers, they can require little to zero bubble in their primary container. And for CDMOs that fill the traditional top down into that primary container, that is very difficult. And if no bubble or zero bubble is required, it generally will call for specialized filling machines that fill that primary container from the bottom up. Another nuance that's worth discussing, because the primary containers become nested, you introduce a lot of variables there that need to be worked through. So you can have issues with the lid delining generating particles in the isolator, which is different from your traditional vial filling. And all of the OEMs will have their different philosophies for that lid delining process. You can see robotic arms, rollers, etc. And with the tubs that the primary containers come into, you've got the adhesive. So the adhesive is not just adhesive. There are different formulations and adhesive types to adhering that primary lid to the tub itself, and that can impact the dwell times for the heating elements on the equipment. The sterilization methods for those tubs also can impact the dwell times, whether it's gamma, ETO, or steam sterilization. And that can also impact the rigidity of the tubs too, in the makeup of those tubs. And then, the last thing I'll mention in terms of nuances for filling cartridges at CMOs is going to be media fill programs. So it's a lot more difficult to justify the bracketing approach if you're used to doing that. The nested tub configurations are definitely more challenging for that approach during aseptic processing simulations, trying to figure out how to classify worst case conditions for the different tubs, the lid removal, nesting configurations, container size, etc. So I think that those are some of the big hitter nuances that are worth touching on.
Great. Thanks, Tyler. A lot of nuances there. Vince, do you have anything to add to that in terms of the nuances involved in filling cartridges for the auto injectors?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think just for folks that may be less familiar with SHL Medical, so SHL Medical is a pioneering leader in designing, developing, and manufacturing self-injection devices, such as auto injectors. We're going to talk a lot today around cartridge-based auto injectors. You may hear me refer to Maggie, which is our latest platform-based cartridge-enabling auto injector. But we've also got a very long history of commercializing several products with cartridges for a variety of applications. The most obvious difference between a cartridge-based auto injector and others is going to be the primary container. And so without a fluid path integrated into the container with the cartridge, you have to do it in the device. And so that's really the main difference. That has a lot of trade-offs, right? Benefits and challenges. The primary benefit that you get is in the container itself and its features, right? So you get the ability to set parts down for stability immediately and then optimize the fluid path later. If your drug has a tungsten sensitivity or a steel sensitivity, you can isolate the drug from those substances during stability and delivery. So that could be a major benefit. The challenge, of course, though, is you got to integrate the fluid path into the device. Traditionally, this is done with removable pen needles, which shifts a tremendous amount of burden to the user. At SHL Medical, we've developed needle isolation technology. And so this is an ability to integrate that fluid path into the device, such that as you remove the cap, the device itself is automating that process of inserting a needle into the cartridge, opening a fluid path, and allowing the user to use it like they would a traditional auto-injector. So that challenge is essentially eliminated with utilizing those technologies. There's also additional benefits. Your overall size and dunnage gets a lot more advantage. You get better siliconization processes. So with no stake needle, no adhesive, no RNS, FNS to consider around needle tip, you get better surface area to volume ratios. So there's a lot of advantages to the containment itself. And we like to think at SHL, we've made the usability challenges sort of a moot point. So this is really the reason why SHL selected a cartridge-based solution for our large volume, right? So we get to enable up to 5 ml of delivery with a handheld single-dose disposable auto-injector. We'll talk a little bit here later in the presentation around some of those challenges and how and why we've partnered with Graham specifically to help us enable that space, because I think that's where we'll get into a lot of the really good discussion later here today around that novel primary container and how to enable that. And as Tyler mentioned before, how critical it is to have a partner that's got experience in those nuances to ensure you're going to have success in the combination product.
Okay, great. And Vince, why should pharma choose an auto-injector instead of other drug delivery device formats?
Yeah, great question. We've seen an explosion in the auto-injector market the past several years. The auto-injector market has outpaced parenteral delivery more broadly. We've seen compounded annual growth rates of 24% from 2018 to 2024, and that's for the market overall in auto-injectors, and no signs of slowing down. So why is that? Why are so many folks selecting an auto-injector? Quite simply, it's around the patient, right? Getting that is the most user-friendly and user-preferred method of delivery for parenteral drugs. And that preference also drives towards better outcomes. So it's a more simple process. You get less errors. You get more cleaner dose accuracy. You get essentially a simpler, easier, and an ability to enable self-administration at home where previously that wasn't possible, right? Furthermore, you get this trend recently towards platform approaches. So the costs, risks, and timing of developing an auto-injector are now minimized, where historically that was a massive lift. So when you take a look at the overall cost of treatment, the auto-injector utilizing a platform approach is just a fraction of the cost. So you get all of this benefit without a significant lift, right? To cost, risk, to timeline, et cetera.
Okay. And what CDMO expertise is helpful for auto-injector projects? Tyler, maybe you would like to answer this first.
Yeah, for sure. I think first and foremost, when you're launching an auto-injector project, having a CDMO that has cartridge or syringe filling experience is going to be paramount. So, all the points that I've made above already, they are definitely applicable here. I think the experience levels can heavily influence the tech transfer timelines and time to market. So having a CDMO with expertise in data with your primary container configuration, executed qualifications for that cartridge filling is important. I'm on the filling side primarily at Graham, but I know that expertise on the inspection side is very critical. Whether the CDMO leverages automated visual inspection, manual visual inspection, or semi-automated visual inspection, that expertise is very helpful when you create these extensive and well-defined defect catalogs and categorization. So that qualification during the inspection piece is very important. So, everyone I think is familiar with the vials and the force that it takes to get the solution moving inside of the vial to detect particles. Depending on the radius size of the cartridge, whether it's smaller or larger, the forces can differ. And you've also got to have well-defined inspection criteria for that bubble size and headspace. So having a CDMO that has expertise and a proven ability to demonstrate control over that bubble size, that has the proven ability to inspect and accurately inspect that bubble size and headspace is important. As I mentioned a little bit earlier too, expertise in the lid delining methods and the particle reduction during processing activities is also very helpful. Some of that will be dependent on the equipment design, whether it's a more advanced design that uses a two-step lid delining process for that tub or not. And then also just, the expertise in having well-defined filling parameters and stopper insertion parameters. Those are going to be very helpful for auto-injector projects. Those filling and stopper insertion parameters are correlated very commonly to some more prevalent failure modes. And I think that the expertise there, it will heavily reduce the number of defects you have in your project, the tech transfer timelines, and then, the time to market for your auto-injector project.
Okay, Vince, your follow-up thoughts there in terms of CDMO expertise?
Yeah, I can't overstate how imperative it is to have the right CDMO, right? All of the critical outputs of the filling process are critical inputs to the auto-injector performance. So there's the basic engineering aspects of ensuring all of the design space is hit and critical, but there's also the operational or relationship-based inputs as well. So having a good working relationship between your device manufacturer and your CDMO is so valuable. Being able to work through constraints, have an understanding of expectations, criticalities, all of these make for a much smoother process because, again, everybody's always racing to clinic, and it's a matter of getting the right product to the right place at the right time and make sure everybody's ready to accept it. So having the CDMO that can deliver, has a track record of success is paramount because the release of certified product is always critical path for auto-injector validation activities, and any delays, any issues that we see there just cascade and ultimately delay first patient dose. So having the right partner and partnerships, not only independently, but also as a team, I think is really, really important for consideration.
And Vince, other key items to keep in mind when considering developing a proprietary device?
Yeah, really interesting question. So this is a new topic, but also a really old topic of conversation. So I remember back when platforms really became in vogue for delivery systems, where you had this new concept of a platform, and everybody was struggling with this trade-off decision, the pros and cons of proprietary versus platform devices. It seems like the pendulum has swung way towards platforms, and now there's maybe some renewed interest in bringing that back towards center. Looking at the differences, there's certainly strong arguments for both, right? Platform devices offer really strong economics, risk mitigations, fastest development possible. There's oftentimes installed assets that are ready to roll. However, if your needs don't fit perfectly within that nice box of the platform design space, it might not be the right fit, right? There's many devices on the market now that are also in those platforms, and so they have a lot of the same look and feel. We even see a lot of biosimilars in the exact same platform as the innovator, or multiple devices or multiple drugs racing to clinic in the same device platform. This can make it really difficult to stand out, right? A proprietary device would offer you significant advantages in differentiation, as well as protection against biosimilars. Device bridging would be a longer bridge, to stick with the analogy. Of course, though, you've got a very unique, challenging patient population or unique needs of the device, then bespoke development of product would probably be the right solution. SHL has a really long history of developing both platforms and bespoke solutions for delivery. We've brought, obviously along with our partners, over 60 combination products to market. So this has been a really good mix of both platform and customizer bespoke solutions. We're really mindful of those trade-offs when developing our platform. So you'll hear us talk about tiered customizations or a modularized platform approach. This gives you the ability to customize within the platform. So you take a lot of the advantages of the economics of the platform, but still have the ability to customize it, right? So I work in customer solutions, within SHL, and we wrestle with these trade-off decisions every day, right? It's part and parcel of my role. Every drug is unique. All of our partners are unique, and we really want to deeply understand their needs and needs of their patient population, and then bring clarity to the options and these trade-off decisions between a bespoke solution as well as something that's more platform or off the shelf. There's also, of course, the option to develop your own device in the absence of a third-party device specialist, but this can be really, really tricky and extremely expensive. It's getting more and more complicated, right? The IP landscape is getting very, very cluttered. You may have to develop a lot of workarounds that ultimately add risk and hamper the overall device's performance. And then, you don't get any of the benefits of the scalability, established infrastructure, and oftentimes can be cost prohibitive to most companies. So there's a lot of considerations, but the big takeaway that I would say is, every situation is unique, every company is unique, every drug is unique, and you've got to really understand all of those trade-offs and select a partner. And we think SHL is the right partner. If you'd engage in those discussions, analyze the trade-offs, and then ultimately find the right solution for your product.
Great, thanks, Vince. And just to follow up on that with what SHL is doing, how are you successfully enabling a new technology like the Maggie 5 mil that you spoke about earlier?
Yeah, so Maggie 5 ml is a new product, right? It's also a brand new novel container. SHL is constantly innovating and anticipating the needs of the industry. The Maggie platform is a great example of that. There are 0 on-market auto-injectors that are above 2 ml, OBIs that sort of initially thought to have filled that void of really collectively disappointed. So we started to work on a 5 ml solution before there was any concrete need. We've been delighted with the response from the market so far, right? But establishing a new technology has significant challenges, right? The critical inputs are needed from the containers, from fill finish, from the drug, and in absence of those, we've had to develop a delivery system. And we've been able to lean on our experience. We've been able to partner with several folks to understand what the emerging needs of the market are. And we've been able to, I think also the other critical piece that we've had is really strong conviction. So we've trusted our experience, trusted our excellence in engineering, and we've been able to establish a design platform that we know is going to be successful. And here we are sort of several years after the initiation of that project, and we've now starting to see an incredible amount of traction in the market for this device. But one of the things that has been really, really critical is around infrastructure, right? So when you develop a new product with a new novel primary container, the challenges start to compound themselves, and you end up with a series of roadblocks that emerge. So great, you've got a new device, new delivery system. Where's the container? Okay, here's the container. How in the world do I fill this? And what you end up with is this ability to, or this inability to move forward, even if you've got good solutions. And we've been delighted with the partnership with Graham to be able to establish that infrastructure and invest in that infrastructure prior to engagement of first customer, such that now as we're starting to see customers get on board with the platform, they have this existing infrastructure to be able to step right into. And so everything that Tyler talked about at the beginning of having the right CDMO partner that has all of the existing knowledge, expertise, and infrastructure, and how critical that is, we've been delighted the ability to establish that in absence of a customer, such that now as folks are getting on board with a new technology, some of that newness and risk is sort of already in the rearview mirror. So really, really excited about the future, not only for this product, but also the industry more broadly. We're out there on the cutting edge, excited to bring everyone along with us.
All right, great. Thanks, Vince, and thanks, Tyler. That brings us to the end of the discussion portion of this session, and we'll now move on to some Q&A. We have a little bit of time. I do see a few questions trickling in, but if you haven't already and you have a question, you can still submit a question by hitting the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, but we'll start with the couple that we've got now. So the first question is, how does Annex 1 impact filling and final assembly of the auto-injector?
I can take the first swing at this, Vince. So yeah, Annex 1 has changed manufacturing around the world. So I guess the foundation, it's experience dependent and CDMO dependent. But in general, there is a very strong emphasis on first air and in good engineering principles for the processing equipment. So you should have extra attention on the filling technology, design strategies, upfront selection of that equipment with your CDMO partners, or as a CDMO. The product and primary container closure requirements should be known and established in order to make those informed decisions upfront, so that you can prioritize the quality by design versus the static checks and downstream configuration. So I think that that's sort of how the CDMOs have been impacted. I don't know if Vince, you've got anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I think we probably need a dedicated webinar to talk Annex 1 and its implications. There are many, there are vast. However, I would say more broadly, right? You got to make sure you're picking the right partners. So having a device developer and manufacturer like SHL has the experience, the perspective, and also the ongoing relationship with regulators to be able to help guide you and partner with you to navigate this space. Certainly, as we continue to develop and innovate, it's important to understand not only product but process. SHL has prided itself on being vertically integrated, especially at a time in which most companies are doing the opposite. And so that conviction and our ability to maintain the vertical integration allows us the ability to control all aspects of the process, from development of the product, sourcing of raw materials, producing subassemblies, testing subassemblies, et cetera. And so that gives us the ability to ensure, as we see new regulations come forward, we have all of our bases covered. So again, maybe aligned to the big takeaway of the overall presentation today is really around making sure you got the right partners to be able to guide you as we get a very dynamic regulatory space.
Okay, great. The next question is, what role do equipment manufacturers play in the filling of primary containers?
Yeah, I think that equipment manufacturers, they play a huge role. So, depending on the filling methodologies, there are a lot of different, there are a lot of different philosophies in reducing bubble size that can impact filling the primary container at the CDMO. We're seeing some technologies of even laser filling, where there will be a laser and the equipment will fill to that certain point every time. Whether the equipment is designed to fill syringes and cartridges specifically, or if it's more modular and can fill, vials, cartridges, and syringes, that will be impactful. And then also the lid delining methods. There are a lot of different methodologies, and a lot of OEMs, they feel like they've got the best technologies out there, but ultimately that will impact some of the troubleshooting, recipe development that happens during filling cartridges and auto-injector projects.
Okay, great. And I think we might have time for one more question since we started a little bit late. Does Grand River only use isolator-based fillers already using validated PUP-SIT? I don't know how to pronounce that, for sterilizing filtration process?
Yes, the answer would be yes. So for all of our cartridge filling lines right now, we do use isolator technology. I think was it PUP-SIT that you were referring to?
PUP-SIT. Yeah, PUP-SIT.
Yes, and we do have defined and validated parameters for PUP-SIT testing.
Okay, great. Well, I think that brings us to the end of this session. Thanks to Tyler and Vince for the insightful discussion. I definitely learned a lot about the nuances of auto-injectors. And thank you all in the audience for tuning in. Thanks also to Grand River Aseptic Manufacturing for sponsoring the session. So we've got a 5-minute break now, and then I'll be back again with the next session, What Happened to Pharma 4.0, sponsored by Azon. We'll be right back.